You are now listening to Mistakes Are Delicious, a Dancakes podcast.
Welcome, everyone. This is the very first third episode of the Dancakes podcast.
First ever.
The third first episode.
And Ben just made a really nice song. Nice.
I did. You're welcome, guys.
And so we have attempted this now
7 times.
7 times.
8 million.
The funny thing is I've done podcasts alone. Well, not alone. I did it with like Moses and Mike, my friends, and they worked. I don't know. There's something going on. So third time's the charm, and that's why this episode is going to be called Mistakes Are Delicious. So the theme of the episode is mistakes. And that could be mistakes that you've seen in society. That could be mistakes you've made that you learned from. Maybe there's mistakes that aren't delicious that you've done. Because I can think of a few non-delicious mistakes.
You looking right at me.
Yeah. When I gave birth to you. When I conceived you, it was not a mistake. Birth, yes.
With whom?
My father.
The dude from Curious George.
The monkey?
The man with the yellow hat?
No.
The dude with the glasses.
Oh,
the warden.
Maybe I'll pop it up right here.
Yeah.
the guy that everyone compares Dan with on TikTok.
Yeah.
All the
Exactly.
12-year-olds are like, hey, wait a minute.
Gen Z's mean.
They hit you where it hurts.
They're also very funny, and that's why I hate it.
Yeah, because you can't be mad because it's funny.
Just like, you're
So-
right. You're right. I look like that guy.
So mistakes are delicious is the theme. Well, is a phrase we use in Dancakes. It's a very encouraging phrase. It sounds weird outside of Pancake Art, maybe. There's definitely like if your parent was walking around like with a shirt that said mistakes are delicious with a stroller of triplets, who knows what you would think?
What?
Mistakes are delicious, guys. I've heard people here say that in like, kids that
He
are
was
mistaken.
talking about eating babies.
Yes.
Aren't you like one of 9?
Yeah.
You're making fun of quadruplets?
I'm not making fun of. We all
know-
can sit here and know that some kids are alive by mistake.
The definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results.
It's just a fact that there's.
It's Hank's
But
parents.
a quadruplets you just do once.
Now, if you have honest
Did
parents,
Hank's parents have quadruplets, or did they do it 9 times?
Oh,
in a
yeah,
row?
they did it 9 times.
it's not the
Okay,
octave.
okay,
In a
so
row,
they're
yeah.
insane. Okay.
They did it once.
I mean, Larry was here yesterday to yell at us.
He's just so powerful that it just carries over. As soon as he
Sheesh.
pops
It's
one out, she's pregnant
it's like
again.
singular wireless.
They've only
Rollover
had
minutes.
sex one time, and they had 9 children.
I think Larry just split into 10
And
people.
9,
Sorry,
but
Mom and Dad.
9 months apart from each other. So how many months is that? That would be 81 months.
You know what?
Yeah.
I'm not even worried because my dad
pregnant for
is
81 months.
never gonna listen to podcasts ever. Like I'm not like if he hears this, that'd be very
mean,
surprised. It's one of my siblings'
Yeah,
fault.
Larry, you've had sex before.
It's not even that.
Wow, what a revelation.
Gross. That's
Hey,
disgusting.
Larry, you had 9 children.
What?
And I'm the best. So
You're the only one with the podcast.
the glaringly that's a little check in a irrelevant box for my dad at
It's
least.
just like minus 10 points.
If I walked up to my dad and said, "Dad, I have a podcast," he'd be like, "What are you saying to me?" He'd be so
See
confused.
if
house
you
in
can get it on a
Minecraft.
flip phone.
So I can think of the first one, which is recording last week, and that for what happened was the audio came from the computer mic instead of the microphones, which I know is coming from the microphones now. And if it's not, I probably won't be on the next one because I would have jumped off a cliff.
Yes, that will be it for Hank.
But there's other things I know that we've all experienced in life that mistakes are delicious. A lot. I mean, honestly, this company was a mistake. Not like as far as it forming. It wasn't a mistake. It was just,
An accident.
which is a mistake. Is that? Could you say an accident is a mistake? Like if you get in a car crash
Yes.
and
Yes.
that's
let's,
an accident.
Let's look up the definition of a mistake.
That's a good
so
idea.
we can like.
But picture this: you get in a car crash. It's bad, but you meet your future husband.
Well, at first I was going to say that, a mistake only needs to be negative. But like as someone who does like a lot of traditional art where there's a lot of margin of error, like I've made mistakes before that have become happy accidents as it is. And so, yes, I think any mistake is an
so a
accident.
mistake as a noun is an action or judgment that is misguided or wrong.
Ooh.
An example would be coming here was a mistake.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
And as a verb, it is be wrong about. An example, because I was inexperienced, I mistook the nature of our relationship.
Ben, you're the perfect person to read that in that voice.
So
It's like a Webster reading them.
So that's interesting because it's interesting that they use the word wrong, because wrong kind of implies some objectivity and some like
It's
binary
a
thing
16th
going on,
century definition.
I mean,
where it's like, I don't think all mistakes are wrong. I just think
then maybe
they're
it's not a
not what
mistake.
you were going for originally.
then maybe it's not a mistake then. Maybe it's just maybe then it's just an accident.
Can we all agree a mistake is something you were doing? You did something, and you did something that you didn't mean to do while doing that.
Maybe an accident is a more neutral version, where mistakes, it has to be wrong, because that makes sense, right? Like, you don't say like, oh, we got pregnant and we're so excited to have the baby and it was a mistake. You don't say that. So maybe you're right. I think that's right. Yeah.
Definition of an accident.
Oh.
As a noun. An unfortunate incident that happens unexpectedly and unintentionally, typically resulting in damage or injury.
Unfortunate.
Okay.
Second definition, an event that happens by chance or that is without apparent or deliberate cause.
I like that one.
Yeah. So,
So should our slogan be accidents are delicious?
well, here's
Doesn't
an
flow as
example.
well.
The-
Branding.
yeah.
I also like mistakes because the implication is that bad has good repercussions.
Well, I got a quick. I mean, I'm sure I can think of a bunch, but one is literally something I see every day. Is a scar in my hand, and that was from the first and last time I rode a motorcycle. Now that I would say is an accident, but it was definitely a mistake. It was a mistake for me to leave the property I was riding it on without full knowledge. Well, okay, my dad taught me it, but my dad doesn't teach well. He just yells about what to do.
He doesn't teach good.
Do it right.
He does not
You
teach
idiot.
well, and he basically is like, yeah, you just go first gear, second gear, here's reverse, neutral. I'm like, okay, and I
Don't
was
fall
too
off.
excited to like, oh, I'm gonna ride this motorcycle. So I left the property. He didn't tell me to do that, but I also was like, well, he gave me a simple thing. It was my fault. I'm not gonna blame him. But I went down the road, a rock road, and there was a dead end into a left or right turn, and straight ahead was a barbed wire fence. I go out. I go to left. I go left. I just kind of stay there in the middle of the road. I want to put it in neutral and walk it back because there's no reverse on a motorcycle. It's just neutral. I don't know why I said reverse earlier, but I go to walk it back. I hit second instead of neutral, because you click the foot pedal and it takes off. I'm able to jump off, but also now my other part of my brain. This is my brother-in-law's motorcycle. He's in Afghanistan, and I don't want him to come back and be like, what the hell happened to my motorcycle? And we were only taking it out to warm it up. So I drive it up this hill into a barbed wire fence, but it's kind of angled, so I'm turning away. I'm trying to turn it away, but it's in second gear. So my hand scrapes against the barbed wire fence for 2 feet. I've never looked at my hand and seen pure white of the bone. But the funniest
Bones,
part about that,
tendons.
so that was a mistake. But the funniest part, and this is his mistake, was the neighbor who saw this happen, because it was his fence across the street. He saw this happen, crossed over. He's like, oh my God, are you okay? He goes to lean down to help me pick up the motorcycle. And in the process of leaning down, he scrapes his forehead on the barbed wire fence like a clean line. And he's bleeding. He's like, oh. He literally, like, now he's bleeding. I'm
thorns.
bleeding. I'm like, don't help me.
What was this fence for? Because it sounds like it's
It's a
doing.
barbed wire fence for cattle.
Oh.
Yeah, sounds like it was doing its job.
Yeah, I was just gonna say.
Yeah, it was doing its
Sounds
job. It did have a sign, no motorcycles.
like- no owners.
But then I
No.
wrote.
No
Hanks.
Hanks. Yeah.
So the best part is
Hanks, you owe me a Coke.
this is like
Oh.
vague in my mind, but I rode my motorcycle back. It was only like half a mile. I rode it back with a bloody hand, and it was my right hand, so it was the gear. It was the brake hand and the throttle. And I rode it back, and my dad. I can see my dad as I'm going up the hill to the property. He's outside working on something. He sees me. He's like, "Oh, there's where he went," because he didn't know where I went. And slowly, as I come into more and more view, he sees blood running down my arm, and his face goes from smile, like, "Oh, he took it out and he did fine," and to, "Oh, what did you do? What did you do?" And I'm like, "I need to go to the hospital. What did you do?" And luckily my mom was there, because I was like, my dad would have been like, "All right, let's get the he would use
Let's go get the hog.
yeah, let's like get the gun."
I gotta put you down. I'm sorry, son.
No, I've seen him super glue injuries that you should go to the hospital to get
Yeah.
stitched. So he would have done that, and my hand would be mangled like my brother's.
Can I see this scar? Oh, I'm sorry. Ooh. Have I never noticed that?
Because I don't show it.
Because he keeps his
Sorry,
hand in his butt.
I keep my hand in my butt at all times.
What happened to your brother? I didn't.
Oh, Anders, when he was working on this house, my house that's in this adjacent to the studio we're in now, he was cutting the flooring and went his finger through the table saw, and I was there with him.
I remember that. I wasn't there, but I remember.
Yeah,
like,
and he
the
had to
fallout,
go,
like,
and
oh.
you know he couldn't. It's one of those things where it's your finger, and you didn't show me the injury, so I take him to urgent care when theoretically we should have just gone to the emergency room. But he couldn't show me how bad it was, which maybe that was a signal. Like if he didn't even want to show me because he was holding it, like urgent care
Holding his
is
finger on.
not built for stitching. So he
So
kind
that's
of
an interesting kind of mistake because those are delicious and in a fun way in that they give you stories, right?
yeah.
They give you stories to tell, and they give you like
And chronic
wisdom.
pain.
Wisdom. Well, also known as wisdom.
Chronic pain is wisdom.
Chronic pain is
Oh
wisdom.
shit!
Wisdom is the faint ghost of pain of the past.
Hashtag TM. Hashtag
What's
trademark.
TM? Oh.
Trademark. Bravo.
Ghosts of the past are delicious.
But yeah, I think that like philosophically, what we're trying to say with the mistakes are delicious motto isn't so much, go out of your way to screw up or all that stuff. It's more like accepting the inevitability.
We're not saying that.
Well, you can. I mean,
say I've been doing it wrong the whole time.
Words are different for everyone, so you can say however you want. But in my mind, mistakes are delicious is kind of like understanding that messing up is a part of the process of life. And I mean, one of the things that while we were defining mistakes and accidents that stood out to me was that like mistakes inherently, the word mistake inherently implies a judgment. Like you're saying, you're judging that what happened was bad and that what happened was wrong. I mean, in a sense, you're saying this wasn't what I wanted to happen and that's bad. But what we're kind of trying to say with mistakes are delicious is that you don't have to put that negative judgment on a mistake. You can sort of...
Yeah.
Because there's all kinds of, like, you can't get good at something. You can't get good at something if you're holding yourself to a standard of perfection or if you're because every time you mess up, you're going to get bad feelings that are going to make the process of learning less enjoyable, less fun, and make it so that you don't actually get better. You're just going to keep making mistakes until you stop doing it because you're, beaten down and worn out. But if you learn to embrace the errors and understand the way they teach you and the wisdom and all that sort of thing, that's how you actually grow through something. So
yeah, the wisdom I learned, and it's probably for the best. And I'm glad. Actually, in hindsight, I'm very glad this happened. I have a scar to remind me, hey, I shouldn't ride motorcycles because there's no good. There's no good that's gonna come of it. I didn't have the ambition to. It was there, and I'm someone like, oh, it's there. I'm gonna try it out. But it kept me from ever wanting to ride a motorcycle, and I'm probably best off for that.
I thought you were gonna say something really like wide and wise, like like I have this scar to remind me that like I'm human or I make mistakes, and so you're like, I should just never ride a motorcycle.
No, that's literally it. I shouldn't ride a motorcycle.
No, that's valid. That's not where I expected.
That's
it to
pretty
go.
deep.
There's emotional scars for what you talked about.
What did I talk about?
More wisdom and deeper thoughts.
Yeah.
I'm sure everyone has them.
Yeah. Well, and then going off of what Dan said, like, I think to me, like, one of the biggest lessons I've learned is that I mean, like, with the mistakes are delicious, will inevitably come to the discussion of perfectionism, which is a disease. It
And
is
it's a
toxic.
disease that's gone through our company and goes
Oh,
through
yeah,
it.
and it's gone for everyone, I want to say. I kind of want to say especially artists, and that's not to say it's, like, lesser in other places, but in art especially, it's hard to escape because there is no objective measure of just about anything. So, it's the kind of thing where, like, I make a lot of art that never gets posted because it's never done, because it has to be perfect. And at the end of the day, it turns into, oh, I want it to be perfect so no one can judge me. And the whole thing with mistakes are delicious is it's avoiding that delusion of, like, I can just be really perfect if I never make a mistake. Which is,
I never have to feel pain.
Yeah. It all ties back to, like, life is pain. Pain is inevitable. Might as well lean in. It'll hurt worse if you don't.
Well, and then the other side of that is so people could take mistakes are delicious as an excuse in a way. Like, for instance, like if I've been known to like rush editing videos and miss things because I'm as you guys said, and I just try to get stuff done, whereas you guys will try to be more fine with the details, which is fine. There's a middle ground for sure. But I could be like, hey, like I could post a video. Like my mind went. I remember a couple months ago when I had messed something up on a video and had posted it, and in hindsight, I should have looked it over a little better or shared it. I was just like, I was gonna text the group like, "Hey, mistakes are delicious, guys," which is an excuse because I know that's not the meaning of that phrase.
Right.
As Dan was saying earlier, I think the meaning is like, it's if you do it, find a reason, find a good way to interpret. I don't know, not
Yeah.
Don't like, mistake, like the idea mistakes are wrong. That's fine because being wrong is not the end of the world.
Right.
Yeah, we're like trying to hack shame.
Being wrong.
Well,
because it doesn't help.
Like making mistakes are fine. It's not learning from your mistakes.
Yes.
That's actually wrong.
That's the delicious part, is the learning from mistakes, because there is a way to make mistakes and never learn from them.
America.
It's it's called stubbornness. I'm actually having kind of a discussion online right now, which I try to avoid,
Ew.
But no, well, okay, so I made a post the other day where we were doing the charity stream where we were raising money for the NAACP, because for anyone listening to this, not when it comes
Probably a
out,
delicious mistake.
it is June 24th, so we are in the midst of the Black Lives Matter movement resurfacing really strongly.
It's got legs. Yeah.
Yeah, it's got legs. It started like around late May, and it's just been going like crazy since. And we did a live stream where we made Pokemon, the 151 original Pokemon, for 48 hours straight. And I hadn't posted in weeks, mostly because Black Lives Matter has gotten me really down, and it feels weird. It feels weird to be like, here's silly art, because it's very heavy. And I finally got the courage up to stop being so anxious about posting, and posted something where I was like, hey, I made one of these pancakes. This is part of our live stream that's going to keep going on. Hashtag BLM, hashtag, like all this stuff. And I got a bunch of comments of people saying they didn't check. They saw the post and started saying that I had used Black Lives Matter for clout, because this post, quote unquote, had nothing to do with Black Lives Matter, which couldn't be further from the truth. We are raising money for a cause for Black Lives Matter. And interestingly enough, everyone who's commented those things, I commented a response like, no, this is for the NAACP. This has everything to do with Black Lives Matter.
Just so I understand, they call you post something you had used hashtags or talked about Black Lives Matter in it.
Yeah.
And they thought you were using that to boost your signal on something that was
Because
unrelated.
the image was just a selfie, right?
It was a selfie of me with a pancake, and like 2 days before I had put up in big block letters, Pokemon Pancake Art for the NAACP.
Yeah.
But then this was a follow-up post where the caption was worded like it was a follow-up post, like, hey, the stream is still going on, you guys check it out. But it did not explicitly say this is a charity live stream. It just it was like sister posts.
So it was a misunderstanding.
And so people commented, this is disgusting. You're using Black Lives Matter for clout. This has nothing to do with Black Lives Matter. And when I responded to them, neither of them, two of them had the post. I got a bunch of likes, and one blocked me when they ended up being wrong. And the other one, I messaged this morning because it's been days and she hasn't answered. And I was like, this was an extremely heavy accusation. I don't need an apology, but like, I hope you learn that like you need to check before you make accusations. It was an insult to me and my company. She said, I'm not giving you an apology because you demanded one. You should have, not put this post up.
Which is fine. She has the right to say that.
Right. And I guess, but what I'm saying, because you're right. It is.
It's shitty, but yeah.
But also, she doesn't owe me anything. I think one of the things I said is, I genuinely hope you learn from this. Like, I'm not mad. It's just like, you can't make accusations like that against people. That's how people get canceled, which is something we talked about in our first podcast.
There's been mistakes made with that, and people, it's so easier to pile on to something than to investigate something.
And they got a lot of likes, those comments. And so I DM'd every single person like, hey, this is for the stream. You want to go donate? And most of them apologized, but the two main perpetrators didn't.
Good.
And the point is, sorry, I know this is long, but the point is that that is an instance where, she missed the lesson entirely. So did the first guy who blocked me. Like, all you had to do here was say, wow, I shouldn't have done that. Oh my God, you are raising money for charity. And I'll learn from this. I will take 2 seconds, because all they had to do was go to my homepage and they would have known it was for Black Lives Matter.
Yeah, but...
And I will check. And nope. they're defending themselves or just not engaging. And it's like, oh, cool, you're just going to do that again,
But
I bet.
on the flip side of that, I don't think any of us should ever have the expectation that people will dig deeper than beyond the surface. So, like, if...
So, one, you don't worry about it.
Well, yeah, either...
Or two, do what she did, I guess.
Well, yeah, I'm just... It's...
No, I know.
You
What
should
you're
I
always-
learned from it.
Yeah.
I'm going to put my info blatantly so no one says stuff about me that's not...
Yeah, anything that's open to misinterpretation will be misinterpreted. Like, that should be the expectation. So, like, because there's too many people out there who
don't
only,
care.
Well, they only read the headlines, and like,
Yeah.
and there's
Clickbait.
and people are and a
Culture.
lot of people are, everybody wants to be angry at something. So like, if you give them an inch, they're gonna take a mile, and and it doesn't, and if you call them out on it, it doesn't matter because like, one, the damage is already done, and two, it's like, it doesn't. They're not doing it to be right. They're doing it to be righteous.
Catharsis.
I think we all
Yeah.
know this at the point, but someone who does that usually it's the I can't work on myself, so I'm going to point out the flaws in others.
Yeah, let me shame other
Yeah.
people for a quick moment of, haha, at least I didn't do that. And so when I said, no, I'm working 48 hours for charity, they're like, oop, I'm going silent. I blocked you. Like, it's,
Yeah.
that proves that their main priority was not
I
justice
have-
for Black Lives Matter
I
and
w-
not abusing
I
the
wouldn't
hashtag.
even like. Have you ever watched Thank You for Smoking?
Yeah.
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 I've heard it's great.
Aaron,
I've
okay.
not seen it.
Well, there's one line in that. There's a bit, and you guys know what I'm talking about, I'm sure, where he's with this kid at a fair, and they're eating ice cream,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know those.
and he's like, okay, I want you to convince me that because he's got chocolate and he's got vanilla, and he's like, I want you to convince me that chocolate is the superior ice cream and stuff. And they go through all of this, and then his dad, who's a lobbyist for a living for tobacco, and then so I don't even remember what he says, but basically he says a bunch of nothing that has nothing to do with the actual
Fundamentally irrational.
yeah, it's not appealing. It's not talking about the actual merits of chocolate versus vanilla. It's he essentially says that there are plenty of people who like vanilla, and there's no reason to doubt their taste or whatever. He spins it around, and his son is basically like,
It's not fair.
yeah, it's like you didn't prove anything. You didn't convince me at all that chocolate is superior to vanilla. And he says, well, I'm not trying to convince you. I'm trying to convince them.
Yeah. It's a great scene.
Yeah. And so it's like with someone like that, they don't matter. Like in that instance, I wouldn't have even DM'd them. I just would have replied to their comment.
I did both.
Yeah, I mean, and then I just would have left it because, like,
Yeah.
fuck them.
Well,
like,
obviously, it's so hard to navigate that stuff. Like, one thing I heard, and this is not accusing or saying, like, you shouldn't have done it, was you said you looked at the people who like that, too, and then you went and that sounds exhausting. That sounds like, if you want to do it, I understand. I'm just saying that
It's
sounds
just
like.
a copy and paste message.
Yeah, I get you. I know what you're saying, but that's. I feel like
imagine
someone
if
who's
you were
going to
on a
like
huge
a
page and you had like hundreds of those.
Yeah, and I'm
Hundreds
not.
of
And I'm
what?
not.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just saying that sounds like an exhausting thing. That like to steer a little bit away from that. So obviously, right now there's a lot of videos coming out of the Karen videos, where it's usually a middle-aged white woman
Complaining white women.
calling out someone, and usually it's unwarranted. Most of the time, it's like there's a lot of aggression. There's a lot of it's fear. A lot of
emotion.
A lot of emotion. There's fear in it. I was thinking yesterday because I was listening to a podcast where they were analyzing a couple of those videos and making fun of some of them. And
People on the
really
internet making fun
do you
of other
think?
people?
Well, I wish there was one video, and this is not like they might exist, and maybe they'll post them, but this is just humanity. I wish in humanity, like you would see a video where a Karen is going off on everybody. Or going off, and at the end she'd be like, "Oh, I made a mistake. I'm sorry. I'm sorry." You never see that. It's always ends in, and that's the thing is those videos out there, but not posted because it's not gonna be a big video.
Which is too bad because, like, I saw a post the other day of a guy out in the street with a Black Lives Matter sign, and he had another sign that said, "Sorry, I'm late. I had to learn a lot." And I was like, "That is the best. I love that. That's my favorite song."
I'm pretty sure everyone liked that.
Everyone liked that.
Yeah.
But my point is, that's a situation where I know you're in the moment, and you like literally you're coming in. Someone like that with that thought, they're coming in like I'm 110% right and white. I'm 110%
White.
No matter what this person says, I know they're in the wrong. But I wish some like they're because we've all done it. I'm sure there's times where we've been in a argument where afterwards you're like, oh, I was wrong, and then you have the pride comes in. I don't even know if it's pride. It might be fear when they don't apologize because.
Well, pride is the inverse, like it's the polarity of shame. So they're basically the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just your brain warps it into like pride is like when you project your shame outward onto other people.
So
It's a perfect thing to say during Pride Month.
Oh no.
There's
oh
different.
no.
Anyway.
I mean, we can get into that too because there's a perfect explanation for that.
Well, just to say, I've heard that this year Pride Month is actually Wrath Month because of everything going on, so it's fine.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
But my point is, do you think
It's not inverse shame month.
do you think if there was a video of and they apologized at the end, not only do you think it would get posted, but also do you think my thought is like it'd be great if I saw that video. Like, here's someone that is the epitome of what people describe Karen is, yelling and calling out someone for something that they're doing, and that what they're doing, they have a right to do. And I wish at the end of the video, they'd be like, oh, my mistake. I'm sorry. I literally let my emotions get the best of me.
Right.
And I feel like if that got posted,
people wouldn't accept it.
people wouldn't accept it. And that's one of those things like that's a little scary because
Well,
we've all been in those moments.
And that's
sure.
the thing is it's the same affliction. You know, it's the same like people.
just doing the act in general is gonna.
At least because I also engage with a lot of fucking conversations online and on Twitter and stuff like that, and I try my very best to not assume I know what the hell is right, which is hard, often impossible. Like we're all very ego-driven people. Like that's literally what being a person is. We're sort of programmed to assume like a lot of it comes from this idea that if we are wrong, it's shameful and we should go die. We should the society isn't going to accept us. And the thing is that like when somebody goes like we're all idiots, really. Like we're all idiots and we're all fools and we all have messed up perspectives and ideas in our minds that aren't fully fleshed out or fully like we have this myth that human cognition is rational, and it's not. It's not rational. Like we the idea that anybody can be objectively correct about something. Like we literally based on the
Even
objective,
water is wet is objective now.
based on the objective science that has been done, the human brain. What we do is we react to stimuli. We react to things around us with our emotions first, and then our brains turn on and try to come up with a story to explain our emotions. Mm-hmm. And so rather than
That's evolution.
understanding, we rationalize, we justify what we feel. And that's why people, I don't know, something I was thinking about the other day was like people who respond to transgender bathroom laws, like transgender people having the right to use the bathroom assigned to their gender.
But Dan, what if I identify as an attack helicopter now?
And see, that's justifying ideology. That's like coming up with a story to explain why your if you have a disgust response or something to somebody saying if you're like I'm afraid of somebody sharing that bathroom with me, you have that fear, and then your brain gets to work on justifying it rather than challenging it. Rather than saying, is this the appropriate response? It defaults to assuming, yes, it is the appropriate response. Yeah. And here are all of the reasons I've pulled out of my ass for why. Like, oh, there's a more likely chance of a man sexually assaulting a woman if he pretends to be a woman and use a bathroom. And then it's like, well, here's all the evidence that says that, that doesn't happen.
Some people say it's never happened. I've seen like 3 cases, I think, ever. I'm not sure.
I personally don't care who is in the bathroom.
I will say this. I
also,
do. I'd rather have no one in there.
Well, yeah.
Man, woman.
There's the little thing where it's like if people want to assault someone, they'll just do it. They don't need to like.
Yeah, exactly.
They don't need to like Looney Tunes it. Like
it's like a Blank Man where they put all the bombs in the woman's bathroom, and he's like, the one place we can't go, and then
got him.
And his brother's just like,
hey, keep talking. I gotta take these pancakes out of the freeze dryer.
Okay. Pancakes on the freeze dryer. He's got to go get them pancakes in the freeze dryer. So yeah, I guess where the hell did we start that?
Well, we're talking
about mistakes being delicious,
which is funny because our second first podcast, the one we tried last week,
We're
that
basically
just
talking about the
didn't-
same shit.
Well, we were talking about cancel culture, and I think cancel culture goes hand in hand with this because basically the entire reason that mistakes are delicious is kind of a revolutionary phrase, and that like it's like, oh, they are? That's weird, is because
I think
of
if
shame.
cancel culture had had their own, it'd be mistakes are forever.
Yeah.
Or mistakes are fun to shit on people for.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess
I feel my flow's better. I feel I'm
Mistakes
not
are
shitting
forever.
on yours. Like yours is fine. It's
You're
just,
not shitting on my thing about shitting on people.
yeah, no, I mean it's the worst thing I've ever heard in my life. But like other than that, and I'm never going to forget it
Yeah.
ever.
Yeah, it's forever.
Well, but I mean, there's also this thing where it's like mistakes are forever. Cancel culture saying that you did this thing and so you are this thing forever. I think that's fundamentally flawed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I also I feel like I understand there's an emotion underpinning that people are afraid to forgive people. They're like afraid that there's this sense that if you forgive them, there's no consequences. There's no fallout. There's no the idea of shame serving a purpose to correct negative behavior in other people and to it's sort of like
But it'd be one of those things if you ask a lot of these people who use cancel culture in sort of like a punitive way and like you never mistakes are forever. If you ask them if prisoners should be locked away or if they should be
Yeah,
reformed,
that's a good one. Point.
flip it around because I have a feeling because I mean in general I tend to see more people of the liberal ilk tend to embrace cancel culture more even because even on the conservative side, conservatives use cancel culture as a weapon by baiting
Yeah.
liberal.
Yeah.
So it's the odd sort of like dichotomy of someone who wants to punish someone in perpetuity on one
for having a bad take.
Whereas those people usually
would also support the idea that we should reform prisoners who have obviously made mistakes. Well, some of them are
Yeah.
just there because
they did heinous things.
no.
You're saying the opposite. Gotcha.
Yeah, because they didn't do
They
anything.
smoked
Yeah, there's
weed
nothing.
once.
There's nothing to reform.
Oh yeah, and
Yeah.
that's ridiculous. And that's a whole different conversation. There's people in there sitting right now for the dumbest things that you can do now.
But the people who are in there for valid reasons, like the
Even
idea where
those people, like,
they
I mean, Mark David Chapman is David Berkowitz, the
you say the guy.
son of Sam.
Yeah.
He has parole hearing now. I think it started like 10 years ago, and he doesn't want to leave prison. Like he's been like studying Christianity, but he does not want he skips every parole hearing
Well,
because he's
indoctrinated into the prison system now. He's a lifer.
yeah
Because like whenever I didn't know this until recently, but whenever you call somebody a lifer, whenever they refer to someone who's a lifer in prison, it doesn't mean that they're in there for life.
they just want
It means that that prison is home for them. They're so used
committed.
to being in
Yeah.
prison
Yeah.
that prison feels comfortable to them. So even if they get out, they're going to go back because they're a lifer.
Huh.
They're going to figure out a way to get back.
But that's an
prison.
interesting scenario because there's obviously people that he killed in New York in the 70s
Mhm.
that their families were like, I want him to die. There's
Yeah.
people. So like
course.
you got to be that's an emotional response obviously because it's sadness, it's anger.
Yeah.
And that's fair. I think there's fair things based on if someone's personally affected by something, which I know is a broad range. Someone could post something, you could be personally affected by it, and you could argue that someone responding, trying to cancel that person who posted that, is that's it personally affected them.
Well, yeah.
And then there's cases where it's a broader like, honestly, if someone posts something like, say they're bashing trans people, that can personally affect you, but also if there's also giving them the power to, in a weird way. Like, if it's a big voice doing that, like, if someone says that, that's...
So here's the thing. Like, there's this paradox in any critique of cancel culture is that, like, a lot of times, like, and I think it's sensible to say that, like, canceling as a strategy, as an idea of, like, it requires you to dehumanize and essentialize a person for something they said or did. Regardless of whether they've shown remorse or whatever, anything like that, what you're doing is you're basically you're cartooning them
They're-
into the worst thing.
Yeah, you're flattening them into
They're-
what you
flattening
want
them
them
into
to
this.
less than.
But a lot of times when people critique cancel culture, they're doing the same thing to the people that cancel. They're not having compassion for the people that are affected by. So like,
Yeah.
it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, you can say that like canceling somebody is not the answer, but also I totally understand why people do it.
No, I
totally understand why you'd feel like I have no other like this person. J.K. Rowling just posted this blog entry about trans exclusionary radical feminism.
And she's doubling down. She's been
doubling
doing
down
this.
and
So dumb too.
it doesn't make any
It's
sense.
it's
She's just
all,
soiling her legacy.
She literally lies. She literally lies about the fact she's using to prove her point. But
well, it's the whole like if she just picked up a dictionary, she would figure it out real quick. Because that was my sort of like come to Jesus moment with all of that, where it's like I sort of bought into the sort of colloquial understanding that gender and sex are the same thing.
Mhm.
And then I looked it up in a dictionary, and I was like, damn
A
it,
distinction.
I'm
yeah.
I'm
mean,
incorrect.
anyone can tell you that it's a distinction. I think it used to be
Well-
used interchangeably, but like times
Well,
change.
it's I mean
Mm-hmm.
colloquially it was used interchangeably, but
Oh.
as far as a definition, they're different.
Yeah, gender is much. It's a totally different
Well,
concept than
yeah,
sex.
gender is
A table can be gendered.
yeah. Well, it's it's
Language.
What, gender is what society puts on you, at least
Mhm.
according to the definition. Like, and it has really has nothing to do with sex whatsoever.
Mhm.
Yep.
But we have used them interchangeably for so long.
We take it for granted.
Yeah, and so there's that assumption that you grew up with that I grew up with and that's what I thought. And I didn't care. I was just like,
Mhm.
whatever, you can call it whatever you want. I don't give a crap.
You know, the-
But I was still incorrect in my assumption because I didn't bother to look in a fucking dictionary.
The fact that
So-
people care is just. why do you care?
Here's an interesting point, specifically with the J.K. Rowling like canceling thing. Like, inevitably, her posting that and her taking this political stance and the emotional fallout from a lot of the people that grew up on her books feeling betrayed by her, like that inevitably affects the way that I think about her, right? Like, I don't think that I'm like canceling J.K. Rowling, but I'm gonna be suspicious of everything she puts out from now on, and I'm gonna I'm
Yeah.
not gonna go out of my way to support her. And is that the same thing?
As what?
Canceling.
I think
Oh.
No,
honestly,
I
I
mean-
think that's the
No.
okay. I don't know. It's weird because there's got to be like the way it's going.
It's
The general term of canceling. I don't think is the perfect way.
Yeah, it's a very
a
I think there's
convenient.
like anything that's kind of new, and not that this is new, but it's definitely more and more happening nowadays. I think it just needs to be ironed out to okay, let's not make this person like obviously call this person out. If they don't change, I mean, then hey, okay, you can say that, JK, but from here on out, no support will be given to any of the
well,
projects.
yeah, I like it's if like David Duke wrote an amazing book that had
I
nothing
might not read it.
yeah that had nothing to do with race whatsoever, I probably wouldn't buy it or read it or want to read it, no matter how amazing it was. So in the sense of J.K. Rowling, like I actually haven't read any of the Harry Potter books, but
Oh.
Wow.
now
Wow.
but now I won't.
I can't read.
Well,
And the only way I would like, but at the same time, if at some point in time she comes around and it's just like,
Repented.
yeah, it's just like,
Yeah.
oh God, I'm dumb.
well,
I'm
I have
sorry. Then
I have a great example of like what you said about like is that canceling her? You could tie a direct parallel to what J.K. Rowling was actually pushing as part of her narrative, which I forget the name of the woman who was quote unquote fired
Right.
for saying that quote unquote sex isn't real, which
Yeah.
is
Yeah, I can't
again-
remember her name either, but I know the case.
but so what happened
sex is
was-
real. How are we all here?
Whoa. Oh my god.
One thing that J.K. Rowling was saying was that she was pushing this article that came out about a woman who was, again, quote unquote, fired because in her workplace she stated that like, well, I'm not in support of transgender people because I believe sex is real, and then the big mean corporate people fired her because they're super PC. And what actually
Afraid
happened,
of the woke scolds.
what actually happened, as much as J.K. Rowling wants to spout to her millions of followers that this is what happened, it's not. The woman who was working for that company had a contract with them, had been bullying and harassing and like
Intentionally
going out of her
misgendering.
way to be
She's
an
just
asshole.
a bad person.
To well, careful there.
She was being a bad person.
Yeah,
Being
well,
ignorant.
She was to non-binary, I think it was. I don't even think it was trans people. I think it was a non-binary coworker. And so you know what happened is her contract ran out and they didn't renew it. That's what you're talking about, where it's like, yeah, firing her, you know, even whatever you want to say about it would have been maybe a rough equivalent to canceling. But what happened was they just didn't want her in the company anymore. They didn't give her extra support.
Right.
You know, like they didn't try to tear her down. They just said, you know what, ma'am, we're
You're
good.
kind of an asshole.
We've said this a few times. We don't want. She's been warned. She was warned before, and then they just didn't renew her contract. And that's like where like that's why saying that she's being fired is so harmful. And I do think that's kind of what you were saying. It's like to cancel is to take the ground zero where they are and tear them down further, where not supporting them is just being like, you do your thing, I disagree, I think you're being harmful, I don't want to be affiliated with you.
And then I got a question to bring it back to the subject of this podcast. Mistakes are delicious. Is her doing that, and then is that like, is there too big of a mistake to be delicious? You know what I mean? Is that something where like hopefully, like say she did that, she got let go, and say the scenario that if you're saying that's what you heard is the accurate account of that scenario, then I trust that's what it is. It sounds more plausible.
I mean, it's just what happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And say now she sat in her house afterwards like, wow, I lost my job. I like that job. Maybe people are like, who were reaching out to her coworkers like, yeah, you were a dick for years, man. And no one was saying, you know, we spoke up. There's a reason you were let go and not renewed, because this is just hurtful. It has nothing to do with what we're doing at this job. And what if that person's like, oh shit,
Repentance.
yeah, is that like, my question is there too big of a mistake to be delicious?
Well, I think that there are a lot of people who who think that I think there are people that are currently, there's a toxic mindset, especially amongst disaffected people that are like, they're carrying a lot of pain and stuff, where they'll tell themselves that no, you can't come back. You can never come back.
What is disaffected?
Just people that
means that kills all the germs.
disinfectant, yes.
Oh, okay.
No, people that are living life and don't have a lot of power, don't have a lot of say, are, you know, like miserable. Like lots of people are right now. Like there's a lot of people that are living under the stress of an oppressive system,
Black
and
Lives Matter and
all that stuff.
yeah.
So there's a lot of people that are carrying all this background pain, and so I think they tell themselves that when somebody messes up like that, like they deserve. Somewhere in their brain, they're like, this person deserves to fucking disintegrate.
Almost as an example, if it's the bigger they are, the harder they fall, and the more publicly they fall.
Right.
Well,
but by the same token, I mean, well, not by the same. I guess what I was gonna get to was that like with mistakes are delicious when it comes to like making a huge public error or hurting somebody or doing something awful or like there. Generally, it seems like there is the capacity for, like I keep saying, repentance. Like the idea being that like everybody messes up, everybody is a sinner. You know, everybody
some just do it on huge levels,
and you can mess up on astronomical levels, and that just means that if you'd like to do any good by your legacy, you have to repent to astronomical levels. But it's still there for you. It's still like there's I don't know. I mean.
Well, here's a very like, okay, bullying culture. So bullies, usually a bully becomes a bully. They're probably not naturally just born a bully.
No.
They probably have a home environment that creates, maybe their brother's bullying. Maybe their parents are neglecting them.
Have you seen the Key and Peele sketch?
Which
where it's
one?
like a bully that's way too self-aware.
Yeah. And that's a great sketch.
My dad hits me every night.
There's in the past 5 or so years, there's been a big rise up, and rightfully so, against bullying. Like there's it's almost like the Dare campaign, which is actually more effective. But the things that you overlook. Okay, a bully who is like the only thing they know how to do is what they've been gotten done to them is bully. Like, I'm going to tease this kid because I'm teased at home. This is all I know. So at school, so there's been bullies that now there's an anti-bullying push, which is great, but also like the anti-bullying push, the part that needs to be worked on is, okay, figure out why this bully's doing it. There's been cases of suicides from bullies that are now completely like pushed against, and now they're just like pent up, confused. And I'm not saying they should have been taking their aggression out, but then now it's just like they discarded the bully because the bully now, anti-bullying, there can be no bullies. Well, he was a bully. Whether it was right or wrong, he was a bully. He's still a bully, and now he's forgotten about. And there's been suicides amongst kids that are bullies because the push to get rid of them was getting rid of them, and they still exist as a bully.
Well, and they still have their context.
And the saddest thing I think is that one of the reasons I like what you said about, like we can't flatten the image of the people canceling either, is that people are just doing everything they can to cope. I said this in the last podcast that didn't make it, and that's, the pain of all this sort of stuff comes from everyone struggling to love themselves. Mm-hmm. And so if I can use a personal example, well, I don't know if you could count this as bullying. It would have once I started voting, I guess, it would have really affected people. It would have torn people down. But I was raised in a very religious community, and I grew up homophobic. And I am of the complete belief that I couldn't help that. Mm-hmm. Because you're born in the church, Jesus is your savior, everyone believes what you do, everyone minus a few people are middle-class white people who believe in God, and you see at church every weekend. Mm-hmm. And we were just taught the facts, which is, gay people are perverts and gay marriage isn't real, and we should actively work as soldiers for God to keep this from being the thing that it is. That's which so is weird. America burning because gay marriage is legal now. Have you heard about this?
Slippery slope.
And when I moved to St. Louis, which
now
was only 3 years ago, like I would see pride flags and stuff because it's a progressive city, and I'd just be like, ugh, that's the thing I got to fight against. And then I met somebody, one of my first friend I met when I got here besides you guys, which was a girl named Gina, and I almost didn't hang out with her again because she had a pride flag on her laptop, and I was like, okay, well, that's a red flag. Well, it's a rainbow flag. So like,
there's red on it.
I don't think we need to hang out after this, So it's not being outwardly
mean.
That.
Interesting.
And well, and big jokes on me because 3 years later, jump cut to I'm gay, she's my girlfriend.
They have 4 kids.
No, we don't have kids.
Record scratch.
But like,
Bet you wonder how I ended up here.
No, it's a hilarious story.
New York accent.
Yeah.
But like at the end of the day, like I've not like what I've been dealing with is I had a complex for a while where it's like, should I be allowed into the LGBT accepting pride community? Because for years I was anti this, and not just passively anti this, actively anti this. Mm-hmm. Like I want to vote against it. I will not condone it. I don't even want to hang out with people who are just born that way. And it's like, I always say that I feel like I'm a valuable asset to the conversation because I was there. Sure. I was homophobic. What?
No, it's just mistakes are delicious.
Mistakes are delicious. I got a girlfriend out of it.
And this is probably a different subject for a different podcast, but she literally, like you described a very similar scenario of me growing up with middle-class white people going to Catholic church, and I did not have any of that. That's what's weird. That's what's bewildered me.
Must be
I know
nice.
it's weird because my church was never like talking against gay. We had a trans person giving communion at church, and it was just like, it's weird the narratives that are pushed in different, like maybe because you went to the school.
It was the school.
But even around here, I don't hear that.
It was the
maybe
school.
because this is more of a progressive city. I don't know. But it was when you've told me like you like literally you describing it as like, oh, that's how I wait, that's they didn't know.
You and I have had different.
They definitely
Catholic
said things that were conflicting for sure, but I don't know. Apart like in growing up in the church, and the reason I'm not going to church anymore, mainly because it's boring as hell, but also like there's things I learned that were, this seems inaccurate and not humane, I guess, and like I would grasp onto the things that made sense. Be kind to each other. Mm-hmm. That was great. I loved that in the church. I still love that. Yesterday I went and collected bread for my dad's animals from the church, and I know the people, and I say what's up. They know I don't go to church, but they're friendly and the community.
Have bread.
It's annoying when it can't just end there. It can't be like love everybody.
Right.
But there's this group you can't love because Jesus. No, he didn't say. But
Yeah.
God.
I have literally had conversations with people where they say they can harass gay people because it says in the Bible that God wants us to. And it's like, hey, isn't God love? I grew up and I know that God is love because I was told it every day. What? But really quick, sorry,
Go ahead. Yeah.
I was just going to say, to sum up my point, like, you know, I tell myself all the time, like, I was a smart kid. You know, I was intuitive. Like, I thought all the time. I was the one asking the questions in school, like, especially about Catholic stuff, that made everyone uncomfortable. Because I think it's because of, like, social awkwardness, because I was just willing to say it. But it's like, I still give myself the benefit of the doubt that I don't think I ever could have come out of that harmful mindset. That, like, you know, it's me being gay was just a coincidence.
You think if you
like,
stayed home, you would
oh
probably...
yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. Because I moved here and I was exposed to people who told me they were, and I kind of had these moments of like, well, I want to respect them less, but like, Jesus, am I being an asshole?
Cognitive
And,
dissonance.
And I was just gonna say that one reason is because everyone finds a justification, and the thing with, you know, like hardcore religious beliefs like that are cruel. You are guilted into them. I remember getting all these answers from my teachers where I'd be like, well, wait a minute. Shouldn't we like have kids are in foster care in the hundreds of thousands. We're really going to deny them 2 gay dads that want to love them? And they would give me an answer like, well, yeah, because ultimately a sin is a sin, even if sinning leads to more good.
Yeah,
and I'd be like, but I was pressured into believing that. So I never strayed away because it's like, well, I can't. Everyone else believes that I would be wrong either way if I deviated.
You'd
You're
get
not
canceled.
the authority on the subject.
To
They
go back
are.
to your
I'd be canceled. I'd be Catholic
to
canceled.
go back to your point, I think you're super valuable to the community. Then, honestly, it's the same vein of that book you're reading, Dan, about
I
the
was thinking about that.
former white supremacist Nazi guy.
His
Yeah.
name's Christian Picciolini, and he basically came out of the white supremacist movement. Like, he was apparently like pretty high up in the Chicago like skinhead gang, and he talks about like how he sort of got de-radicalized through it's really life circumstances.
Yeah.
It's like somehow he managed to find a like one of the things he talks about a lot in his book Breaking Hate is about how like the thing that draws people into hateful ideologies, whatever, we could go back to J.K. Rowling and the turf thing, is this sense of, he uses kind of tongue in cheek, he uses the acronym ICP, you know, not Insane Clown Posse.
Ah.
Damn it.
Jug life.
Do we got any fuego?
Fago?
No, it's fuego.
It's Fuego?
It is now.
It is now. Okay. But identity, community, and purpose. And the idea being that like hateful ideology is really a result of like disaffected people that have this dearth of connection to the people around them. I mean, he goes on to talk about like there's crossover with like autism spectrum disorder and extremism, because it's people that don't feel connected or feel a lack of purpose, a lack of community, or a lack of identity that get scooped up into these cults, these ideological cults that are really rallied around hating certain groups. So like J.K. Rowling talks about how like even in that post that we were citing, she talks about how she wasn't actively saying any of this stuff, and then she liked a tweet and got backlash for it. Related to Maya something, I think the woman's name was.
I thought it started with an M.
Maya, whatever her last name was. But like J.K. Rowling liked a tweet related to that case. And because Twitter, your tweets are public, a lot of people saw that and started to attack her. And so rather than being shamed into understanding that she made the wrong decision, it pushed her further into it. It pushed her further because on the other side of it, she wasn't just getting attacked. She was also getting a lot of praise from the people that agreed with Maya, that were inviting her into their community and saying, yes, finally, validation from somebody high up. Yes, you're right. And we're so glad that you can see through the PC social justice warrior BS that's being forced upon everybody. And so over time, there's just this gigantic gulf as all the reaction you get from this group is shame and hatred and bile, and it confirms your biases until you're like, yeah, I'm right, they're wrong.
Well, the narrative, the narrative that, like, it is, again, I've lived it, is, like, you are one of the chosen people who know better.
Right.
And I know because I wasn't like, what?
I know. Keep going.
I mean, that's how I felt. I mean, like when you're told in school, we were literally
No, I
told
understand
in
it
school,
completely.
Yeah, we were told in high school, listen, you're going to go out in the world and not everyone is Catholic. You guys need to work overtime to bring the word of the Lord to everybody. And it was just like the stuff that in retrospect seems very radical. But like, I know for me personally, I can only speak for me, because I felt all these pressures to not be myself. Like, I mean, hell, a huge part of, who I am, which is gay. Like I didn't even know until 2 years ago because I suppressed it that hard. Like there's so much in my life. You say all the time, I'm a completely different person than when I moved here. And it's the kind of thing where you develop the belief that you are the one of the few who has the right idea. You're fighting back against the people who are fighting you on it. And that's just more proof that you're right, because obviously they're just trying to like tear down society or whatever. And like, I felt like I didn't have an identity growing up. I felt very like emotionally kind of like insecure and unsafe, and I didn't know who I was. So I glommed harder on to those teachings. Like I was like, I'm going to be like
I'm gonna
a
be the
great,
best at this.
I'm going to be the best at being a Catholic and fighting for this. And I got stuck on it really hard. I like thought I was going to like be a radical Catholic my whole life. I considered going into the sisterhood for a second, which is hilarious.
I remember being asked. I got asked by the Archbishop of.
You almost became a nun, Hank?
No, he's like, are you gonna like? I remember as a kid, the Archbishop came to our church. Big deal because our church is like the
What's his
poor
name?
people church.
Something Burke.
Yeah, I don't know if it was at the time, but he was like, I mean, it was like literally like a celebrity coming there. I was like, this is just a dude. My dad always did great. He's like, hey, the priest is just a dude. Because there's a lot of people. I mean, even the older women in the church, they'd be like, oh, the priest, he's so holy. And my dad's
Fangirls.
like, you're just a guy. But there is, I remember him when we were, because we were the servers on the, I was going to say the stage, on the altar. We were the servers on the stage. For Paul McCartney, the Archbishop. No, I remember we were getting communion from him, and he kind of says to me and my sisters, he's like, "Are you guys thinking to become part of the church? Maybe a priest, maybe some nuns?" And we were just like, "What?"
maybe my favorite altar boy.
Oh, and I was like, "Yes, please."
Yes, of course.
But
Relevant.
to your point, it is so. That's one of those things where that. Super delicious mistake, because if you, it's not. I don't think it's healthy for any.
Stop
I
it.
didn't even say anything.
I'm not a part of this.
No,
joke.
I definitely think it's not healthy. Like I know it's not healthy for anyone to grow up thinking that every aspect of their life is the right way to do something. I think
Yes.
the opposite is better. Like, hey, not like everything you did is wrong, but hey, there's a different perspective to be had. And I guess. Because I know now thinking about it, my church, it was not a massive influence on me. It sounds like yours was growing up because
It was the lifestyle.
it was one of those. It seems like not I'm not gonna say lazy parenting, but like, hey, just listen to what they're telling at school. That's the right.
A lot of parents
Because
do it that way.
we agree with it.
Yeah.
Because I know a friend of my
Let
dad's.
church raise their kids instead of TV.
Well, dude, so marriage is a sacrament, and a friend of my dad's was getting divorced, and the fancy church he went to, and there's really hierarchies in the church, at least Catholic church. Like, oh, there's the poor one, and there's the one where all the people who make over $100,000 a year go, and they've kicked him out because he was getting divorced. They're like, yeah, we don't. Everyone shunned him.
I mean, divorce is a sin in the Catholic
I
Church.
know. And
There's so much
and I
that's in the Catholic Church that's legit a sin, but they like try not to talk about it because like people don't want to hear it, you know? Like
But the Pope's so cool now. He's so hip.
But anyway, getting back on the subject, I think so. The guy, what was his name?
Christian Picciolini.
His mistakes are super delicious because he's now taking those mistakes and informing people why they're in this dark hole.
He has an insight into the process that actually gives him the ability to de-radicalize people rather than being the shame mob that further radicalizes them.
right.
Yes.
And it's really valuable stuff because, like, you know, as cathartic as it can be and as much pain as you might carry that helps you justify shaming somebody that does something awful or monstrous or whatever, what it comes down to is it doesn't have anything to do with deserving or not deserving or punishing or not. It just comes down to like brass tacks. Like, do you want to see a world that has less awfulness in it? there's a way to get there. And the way to get there is to practice having radical empathy for the people that your brain defaults to assuming deserve it the least.
Yeah.
If you're able to, you can contextualize their behavior. You sort of depersonalize them in a way. You don't take it you from a detached perspective. Like if you look at people like a natural process, like trees in a forest or chemical equations, you can solve them. You can say, "Oh, you grew up being mercilessly beaten every day by your dad, and so that's why you beat people." Or, you grew up being constantly indoctrinated into thinking that if you didn't hate this group of people, you wouldn't have acceptance in this group. And I think like the most important thing we can do collectively, I mean, it's kind of like, I know we're talking about this mistakes are delicious thing. Like the Dancakes mistakes are delicious philosophy is like a very mundane form. Like, don't mess it, or you don't worry about messing up because it tastes good and it's pancake art.
Because you'll learn.
You learn.
Yeah.
But the same fundamental philosophy can be applied to really big picture issues like, hey, everybody screws up because we're dumb monkeys that climbed out of the trees with meat for brains. And if we can contextualize like the way that we're hurling our suffering around at one another all the time, we might actually be able to like interrupt the cycles and say, "Oh, you're doing this because you like somebody like hurt you really bad, and you don't have the tools you need to dig that pain up and grapple with it and sort through it. So instead, you're just off putting it on everybody else." That's why like you get all these freaking Republican congressmen getting caught trying to have gay sex in stalls while later voting away gay rights.
Oh yeah, one just came out, that Kentucky guy.
Yeah, I mean it happens all the time because it's shadow shit.
Who
It's
sounds like he's an evangelist. And now there's apparently
Well, it's because
he's actively against sex workers and LBGTQ
he's against them.
while he's out buying rent boys.
And then a guy came out of nowhere and said, "Hey, I was in a hotel room with him. I literally know how the moles on his butt look. I like bend him over, and
Well,
I'll describe it to you, and then bend him over."
The crazy thing is,
he's paid me.
I got receipts.
So many of these people are on on gay hookup sites and stuff, and they just expect the protection of the gay community.
And they probably
which
had
is
a upbringing
irony.
like Dana.
Yeah.
Well, it's not. It's not, I mean, a lot of these people, it's not even because they actually give a shit about like hating gay people. They are more in love with power.
Yeah.
Than they are like it's the whole that Jimi Hendrix quote where it's like the only way that will actually improve the world is when the power of love overcomes the love of power.
Yeah.
And
That's a great quote.
Yeah, I mean, and that's really it. And it's the whole it's essentially the Lee Atwater syndrome, where it's like these people do all of these things that they don't believe simply, and some of them probably do believe it, and it's
convince themselves.
the self-hate thing and all that stuff. But a lot of these people, if you're on a gay hookup site and all this stuff, you probably don't believe that. You probably don't believe all the things you're voting for. You're just doing it to hold on to.
Or
I don't know.
feel-
I don't know. As someone who like
I think it's like someone like imagine someone saying Dana the position she was in growing up, and they just continued that position because hey, now you're gonna get a job as a lobbyist. Now you're gonna work your way into politics, and they never had a chance to sit back and look at hey, maybe there's a different perspective on this, and they still have those. Because it sounds like you had those very deep down feelings like this is weird.
But these people are exposed to it. They're in it. They are actively engaged. They're going out to clubs and engaging in casual sex
Right.
with other gay men
some
and
people-
having conversations.
but they probably hate themselves for
Yeah.
it.
Maybe they don't. That's
true.
a
I
lot
think
of
it's a case by case
I
thing.
mean, but I think a lot of these people are I mean, and this is armchair psychology, obviously, but they're doing it because they have power and they love that power more than they love the people around them. And for a lot of those people, it's I lost my train of thought on that. But Lee Atwater, the father of the modern day Republican Party. Like, I mean, pretty much everything that you can point out that's wrong with the Republican Party. And modern conservatism, quote unquote, you can trace it back to Lee Atwater, and he didn't believe any of it.
He was playing a game,
and it was all he did all of it with a wink and a nod, and he he made amends. I mean, even then it wasn't, when he all of a sudden he found out he had brain cancer and he was dying, then all of a sudden he's like, oh, whoops. But it's just
Yeah, that was the same with Andrew Carnegie. He was this rich guy that, like, as he learned he was dying, he's like, oh my God, I've been just holding on to my money, and there's so many people. Like, he built all the libraries in America.
Well, I mean, Lee Atwater, Karl Rove was Lee Atwater's underling. Like, I mean, it's
Good old Karl Rove.
Yeah, I mean, you can trace all the way back to the late 70s. I mean, this guy worked for Richard Nixon, and he came up. It's and there's a great documentary called The Boogeyman, and like I recommend it if you really truly want to understand conservatism and the Republican Party as it is now, you really have to understand Lee Atwater, because he built it. He built the machine that we're all sitting on right now.
That was a mistake. That's not delicious.
I was actually going to say something on that whenever.
No, you can go ahead.
I was just going to say that I think the big, because again, mistakes are delicious could be used as like a throwaway excuse. And I think if it's used with integrity, it can't be, because a mistake, as the definition said, is when you do something. Well, it's interesting that it says misguided or wrong, because you could take that as misguided, like, oops, I slipped on a banana peel, or misguided as in, like, I'm going to do something harmful on purpose, and I honestly don't.
It's a spectrum.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I don't know which that. Maybe it meant both.
Yeah, it can be.
I think we all
but,
kind of
either
generally have an
or.
understanding of mistake, what a mistake is.
Yeah. But I guess my thing is, like, when someone makes a mistake like that, and they know what they're doing is wrong, like they know what they're doing is
in the moment
harming
That's not a
people.
mistake.
It's an intentional thing where there's nothing to be learned if you know exactly what you're doing. Whereas I think a mistake is like,
Well, that would be malice.
That'd be like you guys
Yeah,
putting out
yeah.
a line of, you like, I know this line's going to be bad. I'm just going to do it.
It's
Line?
burning down.
Like on the I'm going very simplistic. On the griddle. A line of pancake batter. I'm going to put this down knowing it's going to be bad. Or I'm going to put this down trying to make it good. Oh, it's bad. Mistake.
Well, yeah, a mistake, it takes you by surprise. I think that's like
Yes.
part of the definition.
I would say that's a good
Yeah.
way to say it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's you trying for something and getting something else. If you try to outlaw gay marriage because you don't care and you want power, that's not a mistake. You just succeeded.
Yeah.
You just did the thing you wanted.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if I'd agree with that, because I think that, like, I guess in my mind, there is, I would make the argument that if you intentionally do something that harms people so that you can pursue power, that is fundamentally inherently a mistake, because it requires you to see the world in a way that isn't real. It requires you to see the world as something separate from you, as something that you aren't affected by and that your descendants aren't affected by, and it's just wrong. It's just like incorrect.
It sounds like you're implying objectivity.
And I guess I am, in a sense. And what I'm saying is that I personally believe that there is, like, truth in the world that like you can look at the way the human being operates, the way that the human mind operates, and find certain inherent truths, like altruism, like things that we evolved to do, that given the way that our social system is set up, certain proclivities in the human brain have been hacked and hijacked to where I mean, for probably as long as human civilization has existed, once we got clever enough to start manipulating each other for our own benefit, the thing is that, like, that particular mindset, the mindset that says it's okay for me to disregard the pain and suffering of this entire group of people if it gets me power, requires you to see that group of people and their destiny and their fate and the pain that they go through and the way they pass it down to their descendants. It requires you to see that as something that doesn't affect you. And that's just not true. What happens when that ideology destroys the fucking planet because we can't get off of fossil fuels? What happens when it directly produces white supremacist terrorists that just randomly shoot up schools and your kid happens to go there?
But
you are affected by the pain that you inflict on other people, even if it happens to your descendants or, like, no matter what, you're connected to it. And you can only really embody, like, you can only rationalize doing those things if you don't see that connection. If you fundamentally think, it doesn't bother me, I'm different, I'm not connected. You are. like it's one system. And so
I mean, there's a freaking dust storm from the Sahara hitting us. The world is all connected.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things though where those consequences will exist, but you may not be alive to see them. So it's like it's one
I was
going to
say you might not care.
Yeah, it's they can't see past your nose type thing.
yeah, I mean it's ignorance. It's like I'm just
Well, and it's not even that.
Cloud
Like
of
they
war.
may not because they may even know what they're doing has long-term negative consequences.
But they're 60.
But the short-term benefits for them.
And I taught my
are
kids
good.
to
And
be
even
in the
maybe,
same position.
Maybe the benefits for their immediate family and things like because there's like like say Dick Cheney and who up to even though he definitely backed down from it eventually, he was a Republican who supported gay rights and gay marriage and all things, and it was obvious why, because his daughter's gay. And even during the first Bush campaign, he was just like, you all can say whatever you want, but my daughter's off limits. Like, and that was that was not even an unspoken rule; it was a spoken rule. And then he eventually at some point he flipped on it because his other daughter was running for is either a senator or house seat, I think.
right.
And then he's just like, I guess it's okay to hate gay people, to say you hate gay people. And now, of course, they're not on
Some
speaking
people
terms
more
anymore.
important. It's stupid.
Yeah, it was,
It's more-
power.
Shots and shoot. Spiritually, it's just shooting yourself in the fucking foot. Because like
Yeah.
Yeah, well, now he's one, his daughter isn't in Congress, and two, his other daughter doesn't
Right.
speak to him now.
exactly.
Yeah.
So
Karma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's speaking on that a little bit, like I'm kind of in an interesting situation because I just came out to my family and and just like I come from a conservative family and it's pretty obvious at this point. I mean, I've seen posts that literally say like if you vote for Trump, you vote for violence against the LGBT community because like he just passed that super transphobic law that basically says that transgender people maybe deserve health care that they need.
Was it an
I would
executive
say, okay,
What?
Wasn't it an executive
Yes.
order?
Oh, was it a law or not a law? I'm
Executive order.
Sorry. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I would say that, okay, voting, and this is obviously political, and I mean, honestly, if you're just someone right now and you're not seeing the dumb things that he's doing, as just a human, just as a human, not like fuck politics, fuck parties, just look at what the dumb stuff he's doing as a human to boost his ego, to boost his shitty signal he's trying to put out. He's very ego driven. It's obvious. No one can deny that. Even the people that voted like that are for him will like dismiss like yeah. Well, he's a
He is a there was a comic I saw the other day. I should have sent it to y'all, but I sent it. It was a bunch of sheep in a field, and there was a billboard with a wolf on it that says,
I've seen this.
I'm going to eat all of you."
He tells it like it is.
Yep.
But my point,
It's amazing.
Yeah.
my point was that okay, if you voted for Trump and see what he's doing now, that was a mistake. Obviously, he can. A lot of presidential candidates have preached what they're going to do and what they're not going to do, and some succeeded and some haven't. Mostly, they haven't. But if you were to consider voting for him again after all you've seen, just in a humanity standpoint, as a human on this planet, that's going to be now. There goes the deliciousness of your mistake.
Well, that's the thing.
Because if
though.
you voted for him in 2016 and now are considering voting in 2020, like.
Well, that kind of brings it back to the whole shame thing because I'm not going to say any names, but I have had conversation with Trump supporters that have blown my mind because they do this thing where they say, well, here's a fact. And I say, well, the reason that fact doesn't make sense in this argument is because here's a fact that dismisses that. Or maybe what you just said wasn't true. Here's a fact. I can send you the link to sources that disprove this. And here's A, B, C, D, E, F, G example that happened that is true of something he did. And these people will say, that's not my opinion. And you'll say, but it's a fact. And they'll say, no, I just don't think so. And so I almost wonder if there are people who vote for Trump who do see it. Like, I do genuinely think there are people that are so in denial, like how I was in denial for 20 years that I was gay when it should have been really obvious. I think some people talk themselves out of seeing it. And so I almost can't say in good conscience that anyone who votes for Trump has seen the bad and doesn't care.
No,
it's almost like they can't
I'm
see
saying
it.
hopefully.
Right. Well, no, and I'm not saying against what...
Because I know people that are like, I'm not gonna like. I voted for him because I just wanted a change. He was saying, you know,
Yeah.
and now, no way.
But it's just crazy because it's almost like I know people who think that Trump is doing a great job, like
Yeah.
pretty objectively, and it's just like, can I give you facts? And they're like, no, I don't want to hear them.
There's a great quote about exactly this thing from I don't know how to pronounce his name, Jean-Paul Sartre.
Sartre.
That guy.
Jean-Paul Sartre.
Uh,
Sartre.
And I'm just going to read it in full here. Never believe that anti-Semites are completely aware of the absurdity of their replies. They know that their remarks are frivolous, open to challenge. They know their remarks are frivolous and open to challenge, but they are amusing themselves, for it is their adversary who is obliged to use words responsibly, since he believes in words. The anti-Semites have the right to play. They even like to play with discourse, for by giving ridiculous reasons, they discredit the seriousness of their interlocutors. They delight in acting in bad faith, since they seek not to persuade by sound argument, but to intimidate and disconcert. If you press them too closely, they will abruptly fall silent, loftily indicating by some phrase that the time for argument has passed.
Yep.
That's a good quote.
Wow, that sums it up right
Brains.
Yeah, they're not. It's almost pointless to argue with someone like that because they're not arguing and good. They're not arguing. They're not looking
To get their mind changed.
Yeah, they're simply they're not
Looking to
arguing
poke.
in faith.
there. Can I tell you my favorite quote?
Yeah.
Arguing with a smart person is hard. Arguing with an idiot is impossible. Because you'll never get there. That their point is not to persuade in any direction. It's to suck the air out of the room. It's to make everyone pull their goddamn hair out because it pleases them. That's why every Black Lives Matter like conversation I've had online that is like pushed back against with these facts, like again objective facts, is always some like white dude that doesn't care until it's time to be like, well, what about this group of people? And it's like, did you fight for them before? And
Right.
they only want to frustrate everyone, and they might not even know it. They might think that they're right.
Well,
And
and
like,
I think that's part of the reason that maybe somewhat counterintuitively that I think that having empathy for those people is important.
oh, absolutely.
Because when you try, like, there's this weird shit that happens when you try to use facts and logic and reason to change somebody's mind that doesn't care, which is that every time they can smack you down and make you frustrated, it feeds their ego. It makes them feel like they're more in control and more. And really, the root of the reason they think that way in the first place is because they crave that on some unconscious level. On some unconscious level, there's some emptiness in them that they can only feel complete if they have punching bags that they can confuse and frustrate with their absolute, like, because they're trolling.
That's
right?
why
They're
trolls
just-
exist,
They're
yeah.
just trolling. And because it's amusing to them, it's fun to them, and it's amusing and fun to them because it's feeding this sense of self that's really fundamentally toxic. And so, like, counterintuitively, if you're going to engage with somebody like that, the best thing you can do is do like emotional aikido, where they'll say some ignorant shit and you just listen. You're just like, oh, you listen for what's underneath it. You listen for what pain are you trying to fucking alchemize here by being such a shithead? Like, why?
I don't know if I'd put it that way to him.
Well,
That-
yeah,
that was a good line, though.
I wouldn't say that.
But
to
you
them.
can try.
But that's what
Try
that's
that
what would be
once.
going through my head. But generally, it would be something along the lines of, like, it sounds like it's tricky. It's tricky, and it's very easy to come off as holier than thou or to give them something to work with. But the real trick is to not give them anything to work with. Don't give them anything. Don't give them any ego food that lets them. Don't take their bait, but also don't cut them off. If you have the patience, if you have the time and the emotional availability to be there, you can actually like transform people in this weird passive way.
Well, the one thing that for anyone who doesn't know, you guys know, but I did telecommunications work for a long time before this, and that meant that I was in thousands of homes.
Right.
On a regular, I think my buddy Luke and I did the math at one point, and it's easily well over like 10,000 homes,
That's wild.
all over, like in 12 different states.
And that was irrelevant to your job. You were just creeping on people, right?
Yeah, no.
No, that was his hobby.
Yeah, that's
Okay,
I
yeah.
mean, that's
Outside of
when
work.
That's how
when
he
I got
de-stressed.
off work.
You would
Yeah.
stroll
People's
around.
houses.
So within that, you end up having to build up all of these sort of conversational skills. Within that, and and some of it's just like you have like these bits, some
Right, yeah.
some it almost becomes like stand-up comedy to a certain
Yeah.
extent.
Yep.
But the other side of that is you have to learn how to work the crowd.
Yeah.
And you occasionally end up with some fairly unsavory crowds.
Yeah.
And
Those people have houses too?
yeah, go figure. They don't deserve them.
And want internet to spout their nonsense now.
But the one
Enabler.
the one thing that I learned on accident, it was just sort of like an intuitive thing that you pick up on, because I have a tendency to sort of like always look on the flip side of every argument, even like you've noticed anytime that we have a discussion about something, even if it's something that I agree with, I'm always looking on the flip side of it to like just pick it apart, and not in like a negative way, just like every argument has its weaknesses and stuff, and I just sort of I look for those because I want to understand them.
Mm-hmm.
You just turned me off.
Sorry.
Jeez.
That was
I'm
supposed to be Dana.
I'm in the middle of a thing. Stop it.
You're not off anymore.
Stop it now. Okay, so, but what would I would end up in people's houses and they would start to say terrible things about people and sort of like they were sort of like they're sort of like putting their feelers out to see if I'm a piece of shit like them.
Right.
And
Either A, you're going to help
Oh,
them feel
yeah,
good about
I've had that.
themselves,
I've
or
had that
B,
experience.
you're going to be somebody
one
that
of
they can
them.
argue
happens.
with.
yeah, and so in those
Somebody they can bitch about later.
Yeah, and so in those situations, what I would do, and it wasn't anything that I consciously came to, but it just ended up happening that way because you can't their argument is not logical. It's not based on facts. So in those instances, they're arguing emotion. So the only way to counter that, the weakness of that argument is not logic, it's emotion. So it's like it's easy. So if they're talking about, I'm not probably not going to be able to pull up any great examples or anything, because it's one of those things that just sort of happens in the moment.
Yeah.
And I forget about it afterwards because you just like I'm working, like I gotta
You
move on.
should have 10,000 voice recorded files.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Hold on, I got a good one.
My
in
buddy Luke, he remembers everything, so he could probably he'd be better at than I would. But when people would do that, my response would always usually start off with, I don't know, and then you immediately twist it around and like put it on an example that relates to them somehow. You sort of you make them feel their argument. You spin it in a way where that essentially, if they were to disagree with you, they would be very obviously
insane.
Yeah,
I think I know what
exactly.
you're talking about.
Yeah, and I talk about that, and I know I've told you guys this multiple times, and I've never quite found a good way to articulate that particular skill set in a way that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Because I always feel like it sounds like I'm just talking out of my ass.
Yeah.
Which I'm not. I'm obviously talking out of my mouth.
So yeah, I've been in similar positions working in construction, because construction workers, they're predominantly very conservative.
The salt of the earth.
But also, I mean,
sausage.
Cat
I've met a
colors.
lot of good people in that too. Like they actually, if you can peel away those layers, there's like
There's an ogre
sensitive human in there somewhere. But there's been times where you're just working on a job site with someone new or someone that you don't even work with. There's just another company there doing their job on the job site, and you'd be next to them talking, and they'd start like. I remember one particular one was gun law, and it was right after a mass shooting at the time. Unfortunately, that happens a lot, so I can't pick which one it was. But it was early 2010s, and he was just like, "Yeah, now it's funny because you're right. They'll start talking to you like you're already on the same page."
Yeah,
he's like,
they're testing
"Yeah,
the
now they're gonna
waters.
of course take away our guns," assuming like I do own guns, but he was just assuming that of course I own guns. But he's just talking like, "Yeah, now they're gonna take away our guns," Like one person does something and now all of us have to suffer. I'm like, yeah, and how I would handle that is sarcasm, and they would always make them like stutter because I would be like, yeah, it'd be really stupid to like gun control, like make it where it's less likely that people could use automatic weapons on small children. That's like, come on, why would we want to do that?
I know.
And the guy's like, well, I'm not.
Listen, I know when I go deer hunting, if I can't have a machine gun to mow down,
You do stuff like that.
like that's.
I need grenade launchers to hunt ducks.
I need a goddamn Tommy gun to take down that 12
My
point
meat
buck.
should look like Swiss cheese.
No, you can actually pour like cheese fondue in the holes.
Yeah, no, that's how I'm. I'm
Leave the bullets in.
I like to marinate my prey with
Their blood.
with just
The
buckets
sauce.
of ammo.
Oh, I was just gonna say the Cinnabon
So,
sauce.
Oh,
well, I do something similar, but I would use the ridiculousness of like.
well, that isn't what I would actually say, but that was.
No, I gotcha.
I'm just
But
being dumb.
you sounds like you're interacting with customers. I'd be working with peers where it doesn't matter what the fuck we talk about because. At the end of the day, you got to do your job. There's a different level with a customer, and when I was working construction, it was less. I talked to customers, but nothing was ever. It was always like, do this.
Yeah, you have to be really diplomatic with customers because,
yes, because it is you are doing a service.
Yeah, well, yeah, and there are moments where you
Time
don't
and a
too, where
place.
it kind of felt, if someone was being a real prick,
You kiss them on the mouth.
Yeah, exactly. It was always it's catharsis too, but it's also like just protecting yourself.
Got a gray rock.
Or you could just be like, listen, I'm the guy that's here to fix your problem, and I don't have to be here.
Yeah.
So like, if you want to
We got a problem.
keep doing this, then I'll just go.
Yeah, didn't you call me here?
Yeah, well,
Right.
I mean, I remember when I was very early on when I was in training for whenever I first started working at the cable company, I was with
42.
Yes, I was 21, so this is 14 years ago, and the guy I was training with, I don't remember his name, nice guy, and we went up to this customer's house,
Is
and
he
the guy
buried,
just
Ben?
comes barreling out of the door and immediately just gets up in his face and starts yelling at him.
I need porn.
Yeah.
I don't have porn anymore.
Well, and he just starts yelling at him and just screaming
My
at him and all
internet's
this stuff, and like we just got there, and he was just like, listen, I'm gonna get back in my truck and I'm gonna go, and nobody's gonna come back here. So like, you can either calm down or you can not get your cable fixed. Like, those are your two options.
Yep.
Yeah,
And
but then
he-
you think
and he-
about why they're like that.
Well, he calmed down really quick, and
Yeah.
then he apologized later.
Good.
Yep.
Weird.
Well, you
Power.
Yeah, you never
Flex.
know the.
Yeah, I've done that. I've left people's houses like, and just because it's not.
Light a fire as you go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Well, that's good. That guy. Apology. It's the guy calms down. His emotion could have been built on many things.
Well,
He may have called 4
obviously,
times and never got a response. He may have had 2 people come out to try to fix it. And
we
didn't.
were probably, it's a good chance we were running behind. There's a good chance that we weren't the first person out there. And like people need internet. Like it's even 14 years ago.
It's a utility.
You needed internet to do things. Like, and especially he was,
Were you gatekeeping, Ben?
Yes. So I can definitely understand his frustration, but it's like to take it out on the guy that's there to literally fix your problem. That's not good.
I can't tell if it's tragic and unhelpful or a blessing and helpful that people seem to need a direct incentive to be kind. I think all the time it's like, hey, maybe I'll change the mind just by being myself. Again, going back to the gay thing, like just being myself will maybe change someone's mind with those deeply held beliefs that I had just because they love me. It's like,
Oh, I got you.
why does it have to come to the fact that like it needs to directly affect their life for them to act lovingly? And again, I can't tell if that's like, well, that's great because like everyone will probably get some of that peppered in their life. Some people will be like, well, like, yeah, like if I guess I don't know. I'm thinking just on the issue of homophobia, I guess. I'm trying to think of other examples, but like that's just kind of the one I know. It's like,
Oh, you can't see anything else.
no.
past-
God damn it. I just didn't want to speak on an issue that like, I don't know. I don't want to sound ignorant, I guess. So I'm trying to stick to what I know. But anyways, my point is like, I don't know if that's like a good thing or a bad thing because it's like the
Both.
cable thing. It's like, they're going to calm down, but not because you're a person, but because they want their cable.
Yeah.
You know, is that helpful?
It's exactly.
That's a start.
That's the carrot I have to dangle in front
It's
of
a
them.
start.
Right.
It's like Jimmy's toe in dollars.
Yeah, I don't necessarily know if it's good or bad
Yeah.
so much as it is, and I kind of think that looking at it as a good or a bad thing
It is.
clouds. Yeah, it is. It's like a hurricane. It's like the Grand Canyon. Like this is just how people's brains work.
It's just a fact.
And it's the whole reason why like mistakes are delicious, why empathy is important, even with people that are awful, because it's just a matter of fact. Like you can lack it, you can do it, you can justify whatever you want. Like your feelings are your own. I can't take any feelings from anybody. I can't pass judgment on anybody. But it comes down to the fact that like human beings are a function of nature, and if you understand how human beings work, you can like get them to shut up and stop being dicks in certain situations that you wouldn't have otherwise.
That's the cool thing too, is that deep down we're all the same thing. You know, we all
Stardust.
Yeah. But you know, like I take comfort in the idea that like I'm not special. There's a lot of stuff about me that has been copied and pasted to 7.5 billion people, and you know, people say all the time, "What's that line from Saga? That's amazing." It says, "We're not all fighting because we're so different. We're fighting because we're all so goddamn alike." Because that's about there's war going on between these like very similar races. I love that line because that's exactly it. Like.
But yet the crux of the whole thing is the ability to we are all the same, but we convince ourselves that other people aren't.
Or we're better.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just
We're all flawed.
anytime you can see somebody else as less than, you immediately sort of cancel out your empathy for them, and if you can't,
They're other.
yeah, and that's literally, I mean, that's how armies, that's how the military trains you part of it, they train you on reaction. So like using body shaped targets and all this stuff, which is a whole nother thing where like that, because there were, like World War II and stuff, like, was it like 40% of all soldiers never even fired a bullet?
I don't know, probably something like that.
Because they were scared to do it. And so through that, they learned that if using human-shaped targets and stuff, it trains soldiers to fire at human-shaped things on reaction, because that's how they've been trained.
Yeah, you have to objectify them. You have to dehumanize them.
Yeah. But anytime that you can see somebody as less than human, then you'll never.
Yeah.
Well, that's like looping back to the cancel culture thing, because it's like to cancel somebody in a way that like basically, is so harsh it drives them to suicide, not the whole like you
Which
made
does
it terrible.
happen.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's like, people are flawed. They always will be. And again, that's kind of what I was saying earlier, where it's like the reason mistakes are delicious is because like life is pain, because pain is inevitable, and that's okay. And you make yourself suffer so much worse and so much longer when you don't accept that.
Well, apparently it's kind of by psychologists been proven, like someone who gets shamed and may or may not kill themselves or thinks about killing themselves, because that means that person was more likely to change. Because if you shame someone, say you say something and then people say, "Hey, you were bad, you're canceled, you're shamed," that person, there's a part of them that feels like, well, I can't go back to the group that I was associated with because I don't really feel as strong as people think I feel about it. So I don't have a group there. They are canceling me. I have no other options.
Right. And it's horrible. And
it's sad, because it's like that person was most likely to learn from it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, all of this is a product of modern society.
Yeah.
Like we don't actually, like, in the grand scheme of things, like, our struggles are so minuscule and unimportant. Like, we're not, like, there is a very, very high likelihood, greater than 99.9%, that I'm going to go to sleep tonight and wake up tomorrow.
And if I have something to do.
And I'm going to eat food later.
Wait, hang on.
And
Then aren't you fasting?
I'm not fasting. I'm just, but I'm going to eat food later, and I will eat food tomorrow morning when I wake up, and the day after, and the day after. And that is the most likely scenario.
For at least 200 years.
For at least.
Yeah.
At least.
So what's up?
So, like, it's things like all of this. That's so like self-reflection, and all of these are all and I mean even things like depression and things like that are and they probably existed long, to a certain extent, but a lot of it is just it's a product of the mundanity of modern
if you're
life.
seeing more of the world
Yeah.
than you've
Because
ever thought possible.
Well, your day to day is not about making it to tomorrow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's no inherent purpose in your existence.
Anxiety
Exactly.
is a byproduct of luxury.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And if you're self-aware about it, then you can.
as is cancel
It's better
culture.
to be.
Yeah.
I'm aware that I'm aware I'm not supposed to see all the world's problems. Like, yeah, you can, and you empathizing with them is fine, but also like that's a lot to take in for a human mind. It's like when you try to think about forever in like space.
It's
goes
impossible.
on forever.
Yeah.
Your brain there's like a blockage.
You just
I
get spooked.
Yeah.
Well,
Infinity is
And
you
beyond.
can't conceptualize
I envy the world when there was 10 people. You could be like, okay, that 9 people, I know what they're doing.
because beyond infinity there's infinity.
well, and I think that's one of the reasons that othering is such a common way to react, because like, so if our instincts are to protect ourselves and maybe like a few kin and the siblings or parents
My
or
dog.
your tribe, if you're like, if we evolutionarily are supposed to protect our tribe, then seeing a person on the internet, but not a person, you see a profile picture, a random handle, and you
filter.
see
A hateful string of
kind
text.
of like my post where I was just like, hey, pancakes, #BLM, where if you would have taken a second to look, you'd understand. But they
This
don't, but they
fucking
don't,
white woman.
Because
but they don't,
there's
but they don't,
20 other
but
people
they
doing
don't-
that.
But they don't see a person. They see a target. They see an opportunity to make themselves feel better. And everything we've been talking about, like the bullying, the projecting, the shaming, it's coping. It is trying to feed your brain the dopamine that you need, typically from rejecting like your true self. Like I think there's a lot of people out there that aren't getting the emotional support that they need. Because
Well, it's easier and easier now than ever to go online and validate everything you think is right,
right.
without any questioning of it.
Well, and I think like, sitting here in this room, like I wouldn't say any of the things that like I don't shame people I try not to bandwagon. Everyone falls for it at some point. But like, that's going to happen way, 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 way less likely if you're sitting in the room with them. And like, you guys are my tribe. I see you all the time, but it's like, because we're evolutionary, not cognizant of millions of people, it is so easy to fall just naturally into the state of like, I'm going to shame this person on the internet. Not like I have to see him.
Make the world a better place by telling
Yeah.
this person to kill themselves.
Yeah, or I'm going to, and really it's like, I'm going to
I'm
make myself
great.
happier. But really, it's just giving you that one, it's a drug. You just give yourself that burst of validation, but it's not validation at all. It's just tearing someone
You're gonna
down.
feel like shit later, and you get
So-
to do it all over again.
Yep,
So to wrap
forever.
this
Chase
up,
that dragon.
the mistakes are delicious. I think the perspective everyone is saying is like, there's big mistakes that are made that it's going to be a little bit harder to find why that's delicious,
What you do with mistakes is more important than making them.
but you need to learn from them.
Your
You-
mindset.
not need, you need and have, I guess.
That's
Like,
what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah.
that's-
I would,
yeah.
I
you
would,
need to learn, yeah.
I would say it's not a waste unless there's no lesson taken from it. Because
Yeah.
one of my favorite ways to look at life is that life is bliss and lessons.
Mhm.
And, if you do something
If
that
you
makes you
speed-
upset and you don't learn from it, like, then that's the only waste that's there. Like the delusion of pretending like, la la la, I didn't make a mistake. Sorry, can't do
No
that.
regrets.
Yeah. Like the
YOLO.
the delusion that you can like not make a mistake, or that like I'm above, making a mistake in whatever regard. Like that's the true waste, ironically, because you're protecting yourself from sadness, I guess.
You're
but
protecting yourself from learning.
you're protecting yourself from pain, and pain is just, when accepted and embraced, learning. It's wisdom. That's what we were talking about earlier. It's just wisdom is pain.
Yeah.
Yeah, being having pain does not mean that you lack joy.
Right.
Yeah.
Like they both coexist. Is like the idea that
You're capable of every
yeah,
emotion.
the idea that that the two can't coexist, even sometimes at the same time, sometimes at different times. It's all one and the same.
The Zen Buddhists say that suffering is the soil that the flower of joy grows out of.
Aw, that's
That you need suffering in order to feel joy.
That's why I hate toxic positivity so much, or however the phrase is. It's just like, no, stop. Let's stop being sad.
Think
Let's
positive.
be happy. It's like, well, what if that person needs to be sad for 10 minutes?
Yeah.
If you stop that, you're just making it worse.
You're just numbing it.
And you're rejecting the wisdom that will lead you to greater joy later in life.
Yeah.
Right.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to the Mistakes Are Delicious podcast. Please subscribe or follow on the various platforms you might be listening to this on. You can find all the podcasts on dancakes.com. Please comment on what you'd like to hear us talk about or what games you'd like us to play. And like and share with your friends. And more importantly, guys, mistakes are delicious. Until next time.